have not backcombed my hair this much since the days that I thought I was Snooki circa 2008, 10. It's like totally not even that big, but it feels wild to me because I don't do that anymore. I used to get it like way bigger. Let's not talk about it. Before I get into the intro or anything, I just wanted to let you know that I've had several supporters reach out to me and let me know what's going on in South Africa. I was devastated to see all the looting going around and all the fires. It's completely chaotic right now. And hearing from the people who've reached out to me who are just genuinely terrified for their life right now and not knowing what's going on or how to stop it. They're at the point where getting just like daily essentials to survive is extremely scarce. The people I spoke with just want to simply spread awareness as to what's going on right now. They're feeling really alone that this isn't being shared around the world. I've read a few reports on what's going on and they're kind of conflicting. So some of them say it's because the citizens have decided to just band together and put pressure on the government because they can't handle lockdowns anymore and just the economic strain and helplessness they're feeling struggling to survive. I've also read that it might have something to do with retaliation because of imprisonment of a former president. Truthfully, I just don't know enough about the background situation or what really is going on. And to be honest, even some of the people that I spoke to are just like feeling so helpless and lost. They aren't even really sure like what is going on or what to do to move forward. At the end of the day, all we do know is a lot of people are without their basic necessities right now, and that's priority. I'm going to leave some links in the description of some places that you can help if you wish to do so. To all my channel family members out in South Africa, just know that I love you. I'm sending so much support. Stay strong. I will do everything that I can on my end. I will have those links in the description below for anybody who wants to help. Thanks for listening and thank you for coming to hang out with me today. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I'm Sherrilyn and I'm so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back to our True Crime Wine Wednesday. I don't think you guys understand how much Wednesday in my life has changed. I look so forward to uploading for you guys and just getting in the comments and hanging out with you at the end of the evening to chat and spend some time together. It's changed my whole life and I'm so grateful for you all. We're only at like 24,000 subscribers, so I can't even imagine like what is to come when you guys already make me feel so special right now as it is. I love ya. Hey, if you like wine and you're into true crime and just hanging out with all your friends, I definitely think you should hit that subscribe button. Come and join us every Wednesday, and you don't have to like wine. You can drink whatever you want. You don't even have to drink. If you're just cleaning your house right now and you need some company, we're here. Maybe you were supposed to be in bed like 7 hours ago, but you're just still laying on your phone, scrolling and you need some company. Hi. We're here. So if that little subscribe button right there is still red, it means you're not subbed. We can still be friends because I just appreciate it so much that you're here and hanging out with us anyways. But like once you click it and it like changes to gray and says subscribe, it really solidifies that bond, just locks us in forever. Forever. Classic. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a big thanks to our sponsor today, HelloFresh. If you follow me on Instagram or if you've been here for a while, you know I love HelloFresh. So when I had the opportunity to work with them, there was just like zero thought, hesitation. I was like, are you serious? I already love you. My family and I have been using them well over a year now. I am not domesticated in the kitchen at all. I'm sure none of you are surprised. I can't even form sentences most of the time. My 3 staple meals are taco, spaghetti, and chicken, which when there's 7 days out of the week, it's really repetitive. So that's why we started using HelloFresh, because it just got to the point where it's like, we really need to try something different. The nice thing is the recipes are really straightforward, easy to follow. And like when I say that, trust me, because I burn soup for real. So if I can make a meal and it looks and tastes like I'm a gourmet chef, so can you. Plus the fact that I don't have to grocery shop or measure things and wake up thinking like, what am I gonna make today? Taco, spaghetti, or chicken? It takes so much off my plate, like more than you know. And on top of that, I love that it allows me to try things that I really would never try. We cooked the Hawaiian Loco Moco the other night, and it was so easy to do, but I would have never thought of putting those ingredients together. On top of the recipes being super delicious, I do love that I get to do it with my family. They've got so many recipes that you can choose from, so it can make everybody happy, whether you're wanting low calorie, smart carb, vegetarian, pescatarian. And I can honestly have these meals cooked ready to go in about 30 minutes. I also appreciate that everything's pre-portioned for me, not just because it makes it so much easier, but because I waste so much food sometimes when I just go rogue in the grocery store. I never know how much I'm gonna need. And I just love that it's already pre-packaged, already pre-weighed. The packaging they use to ship the food is almost made entirely of recyclable materials. It's just a win all around. Another win is that they're also super flexible. So if you're ever not going to be home for a week, if you're going on vacation, you just need to go on the site and click the week that you want to skip, and that's it. One thing I wanted to mention that I love so much, as if I needed a reason to love HelloFresh more than I already do, I found out that they donated over 4 million meals to charities in 2020. And they're continuing to step up their food donations throughout the coronavirus crisis. I know everybody's gone through it and it's been such a hard year. So the fact that they're able to give back and donate that much just truly speaks to who they are as a company. If you guys also want to give them a shot, they have an amazing offer for you. Go to HelloFresh.com and use my code Sherrilyn14 to get 14 free meals, including free shipping. That's huge, and I'm so excited to be a part of that offer for you guys so you can check them out. You'll have to let me know what you guys choose and what your favorite meals are, so maybe I can experiment with something I haven't tried yet. Thank you again, HelloFresh. You know who I wouldn't want preparing my meals though? The guy we're about to talk about today, Graeme Young. Look at that transition. Smooth as butter. But really, this story is going to make you question anybody who offers you like a food or beverage. Speaking of, another segue. I'm on Vizzy right now. This is like the summer of hard seltzer, I feel like. Everybody's coming out with a hard seltzer. What is a hard seltzer? Seltzer. How many times can you say seltzer before it doesn't start to sound like seltzer anymore? These are great though. They're only 100 calories, which is perfect. So this is a great way just to switch it up. I like to transfer it in my wine glass so I look fancy. And then I like to put frozen fruit in there instead of ice so that you can have like additional fruity notes. Okay, too much fun. Oh my gosh. Side pour, side pour. Look at how cute that is. Look at how fun. So summery. Today we're talking about Graeme Young, who's also known as the teacup poisoner. It's pretty self-explanatory what he did. He poisoned people, and often he would do so by putting chemicals like thallium in their tea. And the crazy thing about this guy is he actually got caught at a very young age, and he was already institutionalized, but then he was released and able to kill more people. All right, Graeme Young, he was born September 10th, 1947. He was the second child and first boy to his father Fred Young and his mother Margaret, who was also known as Molly. 8 years prior to Graeme being born, they had a daughter named Winifred, who they affectionately called Winnie. He was born in Neasden in London, which my best friend told me is where Twiggy was also born, which is why my makeup is kind of, you know, modern Twiggy inspode. Why am I so embarrassing? While Graeme's mom, Molly, was pregnant with him, she got sick and she was diagnosed with pleurisy. This is when inflammation surrounds the membranes of your lungs. Thank you, Wikipedia, for allowing me to sound smarter than I actually am. Usually it's brought on by an underlying condition, and in Molly's case it was, and that was tuberculosis. Back in those days, tuberculosis was known to like pretty much take out many of the people who contracted it. And unfortunately, when Graeme was only 3 months old, this is what happened to Molly. She ended up passing away. So with her gone, this leaves Fred, the single father of a brand new baby and an 8-year-old little girl. He was working full time to keep the house afloat. So for him to stay home and take care of this brand new baby and his 8-year-old daughter, it just wasn't possible. He made the decision to send Graeme to live with his sister, who was also named Winnie, and her husband Jack. The area he went to live with them wasn't too far away from his father. It was an area known to the locals as Welsh Harp. MVP award goes to my best friend who's been living in London for the past trillion years, it feels like. She helped me with all the questions I had and made me feel like I was a little bit more worldly than I really am. I guess in this area, the reservoirs and the parks were like bumping places for the kids to play in. But for Graeme, he was just never interested. He was very attached to his aunt and uncle. He didn't like to be far away from them. Even if they went to another room, he would get like anxiety if he couldn't just see them. And he also just didn't seem to have interest in like playing, even with like toys, period. He wasn't the type to just pull out Lego and occupy himself for hours. Usually his favorite pastime was just to sit in a rocking chair and rock back and forth and like stare out the window or follow his aunt and uncle around. I think because of this attachment, his life took a negative turning point when he was about 2.5 years old. His father met a woman who was also named Molly, and he married her. Since he had a new wife now, he thought, okay, well, this is great. I've got a new mom for the kids. We can all be reunited. He did have a good idea in terms of trying to make that change as easy as it could be on Graeme. What he did was he bought the house that his sister and brother-in-law were renting and living in with Graeme, and he moved in with his family into it. So then it wasn't disrupting like the surroundings that he was used to. I'm sure to some capacity it was probably more helpful than it could have been if they just like uprooted completely and he didn't live with his aunt and uncle anymore. But it was still remained a really traumatic event in Graeme's life. He just wasn't okay with being separated with the two people that he considered his parents up until this point in his life. This kept him very isolated, and when he went to school, he again didn't really seem to fit in anywhere or make friends. I guess in these days the school system worked where you took an exam when you were 11 years old and you just saw where you fit like on a scale. If you reached a higher percentage, you were able to go on to a school that would focus and prepare you for something like university or college. And if you scored lower, you just went to a school that was like the usual and set you up for like more like day-to-day careers. Graeme was able to pass and go on to one of these more academically focused schools. And as a reward for this, his father buys him a chemistry set. Did any of you guys also get rewarded when you did like good in your extracurricular activity or school? My mom always did this. We either got like a new outfit or we got to pick like a fancy place to go to dinner. His dad went with the chemistry set route because, like I said, Graeme didn't play with toys like regular kids did. He loved making potions, and he would take things like his stepmother's perfume or mouthwash and mix it with things like nail polish remover. Apparently, he was also known to sniff some of these concoctions and get a little stoned. Hey, some kids play baseball for fun, and some sniff glue and chew on erasers in the back of the class. Who are we to judge, you know? The only other thing Graeme seemed to idolize or be interested in life aside from chemicals and like making potions was Hitler. Awesome. When he was only 12, he would talk about him all the time, and he would talk about him like he was his friend. Like if somebody was like, hey, he wasn't cool, buddy. Like this is not somebody we should idolize. Graeme would get really upset and he'd stick up for him and be like, you know, he's just always been misunderstood. He even took this obsession as far as wearing a swastika on all of his clothes. This wasn't really something that his parents and family supported. I think in the back of their mind, they were just hoping like, okay, like maybe he really just doesn't get this right now. As he gets older and starts to understand like the severity of what, you know, he's idolizing, this will change. And so they're just trying to like be supportive and like redirect him in other areas of interests. And up until this point, I think there was an element of like, okay, well, he's not hurting anybody. Then in February 1961, his stepmom Molly starts to feel really sick. And it's something that just keeps progressing and getting worse. It started with a little bit of nausea. Then it moved on to, bouts of vomit and diarrhea. Then just went to full-blown unbearable pain in her stomach. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it because it would be just like so intense, come on so strong, and then almost as fast as it came on, it would stop. And then she'd be like, okay, well, I'm fine now. And then within a couple days, it would happen again. She'd be feeling fine, and then all of a sudden, it would just come on super strong, super fast. Me in junior high trying to date anybody with a pulse. And then again, as fast as it came on, it just subsided. So nobody could almost even get a chance to diagnose because she'd start to feel better. Initially, Molly's the only one who was getting sick in the family, and then Fred started to feel unwell with the same symptoms, then Winnie and Graeme as well. The main thing that was coming to their mind was that maybe the kids were bringing a bug home from school from other children, and it made sense because soon a few of the kids in school were also getting sick. One in particular was a boy that Graeme did spend time with. He was also known to be quite socially awkward in class, and he conveniently got sick when he was supposed to take out a girl who he really liked, but Graeme also had a crush on. Since his friend was too sick to go on a date with her, Graeme, who, doesn't want her to have to go somewhere by herself, he's conveniently available to take her instead. I'm surprised she went because the kids at school, they used to call him the mad scientist, and it wasn't like a fun nickname for him. Like, people really thought like he was a little bit like Looney Tune, because he did like vocalize his obsession with chemistry and mixing things, coupled with the fact that he would draw really dark images in like his notebooks, mainly scenes of people dying from being poisoned. They just thought he was a recipe for disaster. And his obsession with making these concoctions had gotten too out of control that his dad had actually cut him off from doing it, because Graeme had mixed two substances together that ended up like setting a desk on fire in the house. So he was already axed from being able to mess around with anything in the house chemically anymore. I think part of cutting Graeme off too for his dad was also to almost take away the temptation of him like doing something sinister, because he didn't want to admit it, but there was a part of him that was starting to wonder if Graeme was behind the family getting sick. He was slowly starting to realize that each time someone got sick, Graeme was usually the one to serve or prepare something for them. For instance, he had prepared his sister a cup of tea for her first day of work. She said she wasn't even able to finish it though, because when she takes the first sip, it's so bitter she can't even hardly swallow it. So she just kind of like slowly pours it down the sink. She packs up her work stuff and then she heads off to the train. By the time she's on the train and already headed to work, she starts to feel really off and then starts hallucinating. So when the train arrives at her stop, she needs other people that are on it to help her get off. They notice like something's really wrong. She's going down really fast. They call an ambulance and they take her to the hospital. After the doctors do an exam, they say it looks like she's been poisoned by belladonna. Here's another fact I'm going to drop that's going to make me sound really smart, but really I just learned about it from reading the book on this case. Did you know belladonna, meaning beautiful woman in Italian, got its name not because the plant that's used to make it is beautiful, but because women used to make this concoction from the leaves and turn it into like liquid form and then put the liquid in their eyes, and it would dilate their pupils, and they felt like it made them look really seductive. Who finds this stuff out, I always wonder who that person is who initially is like, hey, look at this ordinary looking plant. What would happen if I just turned this into liquid and squirted in my eyeball? Oh, look, they're dilated. Don't I look sexier? We must inform the church. There is that one person who tried this out and then figured that out. I don't know. So Winnie goes to the hospital. When their dad arrives, she is like, I don't know what this could be. I did nothing all morning. I was feeling fine. I had a sip of this tea that Graeme prepared. It was really bitter, so I actually didn't even finish it, so I don't think it could be that. And then I just got on the train and it hit me. He was like, Graeme's got a thing with making concoctions, prepares your tea. It tastes like crap. Is he really the one who's causing all of this? It's something that he just keeps pushing away, and he really hadn't allowed himself to fully go there yet, partly also because Graeme had been also getting sick with the family a few times. His father confronts him though, and he asks, have you had anything to do with this? And Graeme denies it. He said though that it probably was something that Molly was up to, because he saw Molly mixing her shampoos in the teacups earlier, and that maybe she didn't rinse it out properly, and this made Winnie sick. Since his dad's having this battle with going there and thinking that Graeme is actually doing this intentionally, he just chalks it up to an innocent mistake that his wife made. Everyone seems to be doing okay after this past year of just non-stop illness back and forth. But then the following year, Molly's bouts with this sickness just get worse, and she's falling apart completely. I mean, she was gray, gaunt, her hair was falling out, she was frail, she had aged like years and years in just a matter of a few months. She's the type of person who thinks that if she remains active though and just keeps doing her day-to-day life, it's almost like she can, trick her body into being like, we're okay, like we're pushing forward. She wasn't someone who wanted to just be bedridden and held up at home all the time. So in Easter 1962, she's out grocery shopping. She still wants to prepare a nice meal for her family, but as she's out, her body just cannot deal, so she rushes home, but before she can even make it in the door, she collapses in the backyard. The poor thing is in so much pain, she's just thrashing around, just hugging herself in the fetal position. Her husband had also been out for some time, so he arrives home, and when he gets home, he sees Graeme just looking out the window. He goes to see what's going on, and he's just looking at his stepmom, standing and staring in like fascination. Fred rushes out and he gets her to the hospital. And I think the hope was that, like so many other times that previous year where she was able to go to the hospital and make a full recovery, that was going to be the case this time. But her body had just been deteriorating so much, she couldn't handle it anymore, and that evening she passed away. Something interesting happens here though. The year prior to Molly getting really sick, she had been in a bad car accident. So when they do the autopsy, they realize that there is a bone that's at the top of her spine and it had slipped. The medical examiner said that this undiagnosed injury is what had been attributing to her just deteriorating over the past year, and this is what caused her death. Fred and all their friends and family are absolutely devastated. Molly sounded like a really lovely woman. So her funeral had a large turnout of family and friends. And after the services, they had a nice little buffet set up for everybody to stay and socialize. And amongst the garnish at the buffet, there's some mustard pickle, and no one's really interested in it. There's actually only one person who ate it, and it was Graham's uncle John. And that night, John gets really sick. If I didn't know about like Graham's weird little obsession, I feel like my first instinct would have been to look at like the underneath of the condiment container to see when it expired, because I'm notorious for just like keeping condiments in my fridge for like years past the expiration date. Not just years past the date. I mean, it's organized in there, it's not all edible. You gotta check. Gross. After Molly's death, Fred now finds himself getting sicker and sicker. It's past the point of just like nausea and vomiting. He's getting so bad that the pain in his stomach is just too intense to even bear. He literally thinks he's seconds away from dying, so he takes himself to the hospital. He's there for several weeks. I had somebody comment on the last video. I wish that I could just easily find it right now to give you a personal shout out. The comment was, how about we turn this into a drinking game and take a sip every time Sherrilyn mispronounces something? I thought that was a hoot, but then I was like, thought about how much I really do mess talking up and I can't pronounce anything, and then I thought by the end of the video I'd just take like vats of wine, because I wouldn't be able to form any sentences, because it'd be like, okay, well, the more I was consuming, the harder it is to talk. But I am a little parched, so for this one, we'll have a sip. Fred stays there for quite some time, and the doctors are able to narrow down the cause of his illness to poisoning. They were between two poisons, arsenic and antimony, and after running more tests, they came to the conclusion that antimony was the cause. Before figuring out what the cause was, though, the doctors were really impressed with how intrigued and engaged Graeme was with them. He was always so curious how they went about identifying certain metals being found in the system. He'd also ask a lot of questions about if they were able to figure out like what levels were lethal. See, this is not a good game to play. Still, at this point, no alarm bells are sounding off yet. It's not until Graham's science teacher, of all people, starts to suspect that his love and obsession with chemistry is being taken to dangerous lengths. Which gives you an idea of like how intense he must have been about it, because usually teachers love when students are engaged and love when they're passionate about the subject that they're teaching. But for Graham's teacher, he felt like his passion was reckless. He felt like the experiments that he was interested in were far too dangerous and just at a much higher level than Graeme was prepared for, and certainly not something that he was going to introduce in class. He also felt that when Graeme would turn in assignments that, you know, you'd have to research certain chemicals or maybe even a famous scientist, he'd always choose topics or people who were famous for killing people with the chemicals that he was researching. One day, when the class was empty, the teacher goes into Graham's desk and he finds all of these dark drawings with people who are dying by being poisoned. On top of that, in the back of his desk, he finds a bunch of little bottles with toxic chemicals in them. The teacher doesn't even call Graeme's father to talk about it and bring him in. He just goes straight to the police. I guess the police felt that this was serious enough to even also bypass the family. They set up this big elaborate operation and they staged this career interview with Graeme and who he believes is this career counselor, but really it's a police psychologist wanting to ask him questions to figure out if he's really dangerous or this is just an innocent curiosity. Based on what he heard from Graeme and just his knowledge and not wanting to experiment with chemicals for anything to do with positivity or advances in science, he's yeah, this kid most definitely needs police interference. On May 23rd, 1962, they bring the police in and they interview Graeme. They started off by just showing him all of the things that his teacher found in his desk. He just chalks it up to him being creative and artistic, and there's no dark underlining tones there. It's just him expressing himself. He also says he has no negative obsession with poison. And as he's saying this bottle of powder falls out of his pocket and it ends up being a vial of antimony. Can you imagine? He's just weird. How did that get in there? Again, he just tries to play it off like something innocent, and it's hours later that he finally admits to police that they are right. He starts by confessing that he hated his stepmother. One time, actually, I guess he even drew out this scene with this graveyard and then drew this big tombstone, and it said, "In hateful memory of Molly Young" on it. And then he gave it to her. Can you imagine? He then says he's got something that he wants to show to the police, and he brings them to this stockpile of poison. And it's not just a few bottles, but a little bit of stuff here and there. I guess he had enough substance to kill over 300 people. He said he would get these chemicals and use them to make mixtures from the drugstore, and he had acquired a fake ID to do so because you needed to be 17 to get any drugs on your own, and he was only 13 years old. He showed them 2 different locations that he would store his stash. One was in a hedge near his house, and the other was in a shed of his neighbor's, which was really ballsy because this shed he had actually set on fire because he was experimenting with stuff a few months prior. And they had already suspected that he must have been using it for something sketchy. He denied it, but then he didn't ever stop using it. He just continued to use it to store his stuff in. He tells the police it was him that was responsible for killing his stepmother, and he said it actually never even started there. He said he initially started experimenting with poisoning people on his classmates, but what would happen was they would get sick and he'd see that initial illness start at school, but then they'd go home and then they'd stay at home until they were rested and feeling better. So he couldn't watch them throughout the whole process. He said part of why he did what he did was so that he could observe them. So he wanted to see what they looked like at the peak of their sickness, how long it took to recover, and what was different between each individual. Since it wasn't possible for him to just watch them 24/7, that's why he decided to move it closer to home. He said he would sprinkle poison over the food that was being prepared or within the tea that everybody was drinking. He admitted that there was a couple times that he mixed up the plates that he had poisoned, and that's why he accidentally got sick a few times. So it was never to throw anybody off that oh, this couldn't be Graeme because he's sick too. He just simply mixed them up and got sick. He said these experiments became an addiction almost. He said he couldn't stop because the more he was observing, the more he wanted to push the limits. He tried to explain that this was innocent and this was all just experimental and it had just gone out of hand and it was an obsession. But when police realized that he hated his stepmom and then they were able to retrieve her medical reports, they found out that she was getting much larger doses than anybody else, so that it was intentional for her to be harmed. And that injury that the medical examiner thought attributed to her death was actually also a sign of long-term levels of antimony poisoning. Antimony. One thing that's so crazy and actually is mad scientist for Graeme is that he had this need to share his knowledge and how much he knew about what poisons did, and almost share his findings. So when he really didn't need to say anything and just be like, yeah, you guys are right, like this is what happened, he's like, actually, the antimony isn't even what killed my stepmother. What happened was I started to notice that she was building up a tolerance to it. She had been exposed to it for so long that he saw that the doses that he was giving her that used to get her really sick, she was like deteriorating, but then she would build up a tolerance of it. And he's like, hey, like she's not dying. So the day of her death, he switched up the poison and he actually gave her enough thallium to kill 5 people. So that's what killed her. It wasn't the antimony. It's like, he's like, okay, if you're going to accuse me of killing somebody, like get it right. He was charged, but he was only able to be charged with attempted murder against his father, his sister, and then the romantic rival that he had at school that he took out like the girlfriend for. Since his stepmom was cremated, they weren't able to have enough evidence to prove like what the story he was telling was true. Even though they believed he was telling the truth, there was just no way of confirming it. Based on this, he was sentenced to 15 years at the very well-known Broadmoor Hospital. We recently talked about Broadmoor. Actually, this is the hospital that the Hannibal the Cannibal episode that we did a couple weeks ago, this is where he stayed when he killed one of the patients that was in there. If you haven't seen that video, this is a very well-known hospital and it housed a lot of criminals who were found guilty for reasons of insanity. Not long after Graeme also gets to the hospital, another inmate is killed. This was a man named John Barrage, and Graeme was not a fan. Graeme actually wrote to his sister about his annoyance towards him because he had like a really loud snore. Conveniently, he didn't need to put up with it for too long, because what do you know it, he was given a lethal dose. Okay, you guys try to say it. It's hard. Lethal dose of. He was given a lethal dose of cyanide. The problem is there was no cyanide on site. So medical staff are tearing the place apart, being like, who brought this in? How could this possibly come into the facility? And Graeme, being the poison connoisseur that he is, he's like, you guys are looking in the wrong place. What they're looking for is right in front of their faces. He brings them to a bush that's on the property, and it's called a cherry laurel. And when you crush the leaves, cyanide is released. Again, who figures this out? For whatever reason, they didn't even think that Graeme was responsible. I guess it just escaped their mind why he was there in the first place and how he could know this about the plant. It wasn't until a few weeks later that he almost got the opportunity to take out an entire unit that staff were like, I think we need to watch him constantly. I guess what happened was he got his hands on some bleach and he put it in the entire coffee jug that was going to serve all of the patients. But before the staff had served it to them, they smelt like the really strong scent of bleach and they were like, not today, Graeme. Since he was being watched like a hawk and wasn't able to explore his poison hobby anymore, he took up another one of making wooden swastikas and turning them into like little charms for necklaces. He was also 14, so he was going through puberty and starting to grow facial hair. So once he was able to grow enough, he took that opportunity to grow a mustache that resembled Hitler's. He didn't attempt to poison anybody again in the hospital, so I guess that was a bonus. By 1967, he had been there for 5 years. Since he hadn't tried to poison anybody, the staff were like, perfect. He's healing. So he's moved to another ward and given more freedom. With this freedom, he was able to like explore a little bit more, didn't have all the eyes on him. So he got his hands on sugar soap. He mixed that with the tea on the unit and he got 97 patients sick. Instead of reporting it to professionals though and telling them, like this guy is nowhere near getting better, the patients decide to beat him up instead and just like get their own revenge. I'm sure for them it felt like, a win, but staff just continue thinking he's getting better by the day. And in 1970, the chief psychologist at the hospital, whose number one goal was to rehabilitate as many patients as possible and have them be able to go back out into society, he writes a letter of recommendation to the Board of Appeals to have him released. Allegedly, Graeme even told a nurse that he was going to kill a victim for every year that he was in Broadmoor, and 2 other doctors opposed the decision, saying that they still felt like whenever he's given the opportunity to have freedom, he's going to strike again. The request still goes through, and on February 1st, 1971, he's released. His dad was still bitter with him about the whole killing his second wife thing, so So when Graeme was released, he went to go stay with his sister Winnie, who he still kept in contact with. She sounded really sweet and just wanted to see the best in Graeme, so she was happy to have him at her house. She was a wife now. She was living in a really nice area with her husband. I can imagine that even though Winnie wants to see the best in her brother, it probably wasn't very easy for her husband, because Graeme still, all he wanted to talk about at like dinner was poisons and his knowledge of them and his favorite person in the world, Hitler. So he's like, what did I marry into? He tried to integrate back into society by getting a job, and he did find one as a storekeeper out in Slough. This is the area where The Office, like UK edition, was set in. The area was quite a commute from where his sister was living, so he moved into a hostel to take out a bunch of that time of traveling. And are we surprised that within days of him arriving at the hostel, a guy that's also staying there gets sick? His name's Trevor Sparks, and he's a soccer player. So when he comes down with this illness, he's kind of stressing because he's got a big game to play the next day. And Graham's like, here, take a sip of this wine. It'll just like get you right back up and going. Is it that my brain works too fast for my mouth, or does my mouth work too fast for my brain? There's a disconnect there. Trevor figures he's got nothing to lose. He wants to play this game, so he gives it a shot. He ends up so much worse. He's in excruciating pain. He still actually shows up to the field the next day though, but as he's walking to his teammates, he just collapses. He's taken to the hospital and miraculously he's able to be saved, but the internal damage was so severe that he was never able to play soccer again. While he's in the hospital, Graeme visits him to, make sure he's doing okay. And what do you know it? Another patient in the hospital starts getting sick too. He says he doesn't know what happened to him. The last thing he remembers was that he was visited by a young guy who came in to offer him some tea and company. And not long after, he got so sick and suffered so much pain. The pain for him was actually so intense and long term that he was never able to find anything to properly manage it, that it became too much for him and he took his own life. By May of that year, I guess Graeme felt he had made enough of an impression in Slough that he decided it was time for him to leave. He gets a job back closer to where Winnie lives in a factory that makes camera equipment. Being the newbie at the job, it was Graeme's responsibility to prepare the tea for his coworkers at their morning and afternoon tea break. And within days of him starting, his coworker who was training him to do his job so that he could move on to a different position at another factory starts to get violently ill. He was supposed to stay for 3 weeks to get Graeme all trained up before he left to his next job. And within those 3 weeks, he was off work sick 12 times. Thankfully for him, he was able to move on to his next endeavor and he recovered. After he left though, the store manager, Bob, he starts feeling like this sickness is plaguing him constantly too. So he'd go back and forth, he'd be at work, get sick, go home, rest up for a few days, make a full recovery, come back, get sick again. The last time he returned to work, he left sicker than he had ever been. Not only sick, but again in agony. His nerves were also going numb and he was hallucinating. He's rushed to the hospital, and when he gets there, he's diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome. Guillain-Barré syndrome. It sounds absolutely awful. It attacks your autoimmune system. And in Bob's case, paralysis had spread, and in 10 days, it had reached his lungs and he died from bronchopneumonia. I guess the staff at the factory were absolutely broken by this. Bob was really well loved. He was only a couple of years away from retiring, and he was the guy that everybody felt like deserved it. He had worked so hard for that time in his life to just sit back and enjoy. Graeme also appeared to others to be really affected, even knowing Bob for just a short period of time. He was always wanting to bring it up and talk about it. Even several weeks later, when everybody was like, okay, we need to talk about something else, we need to move forward, it's just too depressing and too sad, Graeme wouldn't stop. It's just all he was trying to do was figure out like, what could it have been? What could have happened? And play out all these different scenarios. Then, like a plague, this illness rips through the factory again. It was almost like everywhere you looked, somebody was like huddled over in pain, rushing out of rooms to get sick, just like huddled over in agony. A lot of them couldn't even like properly move their limbs. It got to the point where everyone was like, hey, this isn't a flu bug. And they started thinking that maybe something was in the water in the factory. Before anyone has answers, another employee gets hit hard. His name's Jethro Batt. His illness starts when Graeme makes him a cup of coffee. Jethro takes a sip. It's really bitter. So he just slowly pours it down the drain, and Graeme sees what he's doing. He didn't want to offend him or anything, and Graeme's like, oh, what? Do you think I'm trying to poison you or something? They just laugh it off, but hours later, he's in rough shape. He's able to recover while he's at home recuperating, but then as soon as he goes back to work, he gets hit again. The pain's so bad for him that also while he's in the hospital, he's thinking of ways to just end his life because he can't handle it. Luckily for him, though, he's able to make a full recovery. His co-worker, a gentleman named Fred Biggs, though, he wasn't so lucky. He was even in worse shape than Jethro, which was just mind-boggling to everybody. His condition was so bad that even his skin was peeling, and for him, he just couldn't recover from it. And in November of that year, he was the second employee of that factory to die. Of course, everybody at work is just beside themselves. They're like, what the heck is going on? Everybody's getting sick. We can't control it. Now 2 people have died. So they hold this staff meeting to give everybody a chance to vent and talk about it. Everyone's swirling ideas about what could be going on. And the conclusion just keeps kind of getting reverted back to this mystery bug. And then Graeme goes and raises his hand and he asks why thallium has never ever been considered to be the cause. He goes on to say that everybody's illness and the symptoms that the 2 people had before they passed away were textbook thallium poisoning. So the work doctor on site is like, what young guy would ask this? He doesn't even have any idea about his past obsession with poisoning and killing people. But it was an odd enough question that he decided to look into him. He goes to the police, they pull up his record, and they find out about his history at Broadmoor.
So welcome to our channel.
I'm almost done. Police pull up his records from his stay at Broadmoor, and they're floored that he's even walking the streets. It was enough for them to go to his house and just bust in and do a search. He wasn't even at home at the time. He was actually visiting his aunt, who he used to be very close with, that raised him for the first couple years of his life. So they have free reign of the place, and his house looks like his desk did all those years ago when his teacher found dark drawings and stuff. He's got the same idea, but just plastered all over the wall now. He's also got vials of powder just neatly lined along the room. And then they find the smoking gun. It's a journal that's under his bed, and inside of it is a full account of every single employee that got sick at the factory. It's not just oh, George was sick today, he got sent home, I had tea and crumpets. I could really go for a little crumpet right now. But he's got who was sick, what their symptoms were, and how much poison he gave them. He even had notes beside certain names what their treatment plan was, whether he wanted them to live and observe at what limit he could push it, and then what their symptoms were as they were nursing themselves back to health, or how fast people were deteriorating and what levels of poison he was giving to kill somebody. In this journal, they realized that 70 people had been poisoned at this factory. 2 had died, all in a matter of a couple months. 70 people. He was just relentless. They're able to track him down at his father's house, which is where he's having the visit with his aunt. And when they get there, it's almost like no one just was surprised. His dad opens the door, sees the police, and he just points to his son. He's like, I know I didn't do anything. You're here for him, probably. I guess his aunt just looks at Graeme and she's like, what have you done now? And Graeme's response to the police is, which one are you here for? They arrest him and they take him to the jail. And while they're searching him, they find a bottle of thallium on him. He says that he was using it as his final goodbye. I think just given his pattern, it's probably safe to say that he was probably either planning on poisoning his dad again or his aunt or both, or saving it for somebody he just approached at a coffee shop. While he was being questioned, he definitely didn't need his arm twisted to confess like usual. He was stoked to talk about what he did pretty much. He even shared with the police that he was actually present for Bob's cremation, like Bob, the boss that everybody loved. Yeah, he was there when he was cremated so that he could watch the evidence go up in flames so that it wouldn't like tie to him and be like, oh, there was poison here. After he confesses, they ask him to write a confession, and he's basically like, you wish. It's one thing to just like verbally tell you this, but I'm going to deny everything in court, so I'm not putting anything in writing. He does go to trial, and when it's brought up that he did confess to police, he says that he did so just because he wanted to tell them what they wanted to hear so that he could get food. And he says that the diary entries that they found were just like fictional notes that he was using to keep as reference as they came to him because he wanted to write a book in the future. Don't we all? He was found guilty again. This time, though, he was sentenced to 4 life sentences and an additional 10 for like good measure. This time, he wasn't sent back to Broadmoor, though. He was sent to Parkhurst Prison. His only friend there was Ian Brady, who is famously known as one of the killers of the Moors murderers. He was there for 18 years, and on August 1st, 1990, he was found dead in his cell from an apparent heart attack. There's been some theories that he poisoned himself to just be done with it, but then it's like, why did he wait over 20 years to do that? There's also a theory that he was caught by other inmates trying to poison them, so then they forced him to ingest the poison that he was going to give them. It's probably the heart attack route, but like in cases like this, there's always going to be room for theories. Really, all we know is this guy was a piece of friggin' work. And these are the guys that are so unbelievably scary, so heartless, there's not like a sliver of empathy anywhere, and then no like clear direction of why they are the way they are, especially just showing signs at such a young age. I can imagine it was probably quite traumatic for him when he was separated from his aunt and uncle, but you wouldn't think it would like lead to this. It wasn't like he left them and never saw them again. They were still in the family. They were still very close to him. He didn't like go from them to this like abusive household where he was neglected and not fed and tortured and starved. You know, like we do hear about stories like that where people grow up and they do horrible things and you're almost like, ooh, like he really wasn't given a shot at life. But this wasn't the case here. Like his dad even bought the house that he had grown up in for those 2 years so that he could be like as comfortable as possible. Really though, it's the only thing on the surface that looks like it could have like redirected his life into that poisoning one. This case was wild though, and it literally even makes me not trust myself to pour my own beverage. I'll probably be like this for like a week or so. Seriously though, even when I was just like sipping my water while I was reading on this case, I was like sniffing it, looking around at my family members being like, huh, that blink looked suspicious. You guys are probably going to be the same now, so sorry. It'll only last like a couple days. Alrighty, that is it for me today, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you again to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video and for making me feel like a bomb chef every time I make one of your meals. Don't forget to go to HelloFresh.com and use my code Sherrilyn14 to get 14 free meals, including free shipping. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means the world to me. You know I love and I appreciate you so, so much. I'll see you all in the next video. I will miss you terribly until then. Make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.